Chedorlaomer, king of Elam.
The word,
That
stop right here. I deliberately, deliberately didn't want to read this first paragraph. Genesis chapter 14. Let's do this.
do it, just do it. Genesis 14. I'm
War,
excited.
War of the Kings. We're jumping
War of the
straight
Kings.
in. Justin, get us
Yep.
started.
Let's do this. Okay. Verse 1. And it came about in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Ellasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goim.
The word,
That
stop right here. I deliberately, deliberately didn't want to read this first paragraph. Keep going though.
I like it. Verse 2. That they made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and king of Bela, that is Zor. All these came as allies to the valley of Siddim, that is Salt Sea. 12 years they had served Chedorlaomer, but the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him came and defeated Rephaim and Ashtaroth, Karnaim, and the Zuzim in Ham, and the Emim in Shaveh Kiriathaim, and the Horites in their Mount Seir, as far as El Paran, which is by the wilderness. Then they turned back and came to En Mishpat, Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and conquered all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites who lived in Hazazon Tamar. I tried a lot. I was gonna break at some point. Okay.
Verse 8. Keep this rolling, bro.
Yeah, who lived in Hazazon Tamar, and the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zor, came out, and they arrayed for battle against them in the valley of Siddim, against Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goim, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Ellasar, 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Siddim was full of tar pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, and they fell into them. But those who survived fled to the hill country. Then they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their food supply and departed. They also took Lot, Abram's nephew, and his possessions and departed, for he was living in Sodom. Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
Very mad respect for you there. Congratulations. Thank you for taking the bullet there. Let me go ahead and jump straight in here. That's all extremely confusing at this moment. I'm sure everyone's thoroughly confused. I know I was. So let me help organize this in a way that's a little bit better understood. So we start out talking about several kings, and these are the first 4 kings listed right here that Justin just mentioned: King of Shinar, King of Ellasar, King of Elam, and the King of Goim. The primary guy you really want to pay attention to here is Chedorlaomer. This is the guy you really want to pay attention to. And these 4 kings, that they made war with these 5 kings right here. And the ones you really want to pay attention to here are King of Sodom, Bera, king of Sodom, and the Bersha, king of Gomorrah. Now, it seems that all these came as allies to the valley of Siddim, and that is the Salt Sea. And the Salt Sea seems to represent the Dead Sea, which, if you go on Google Maps, you can see the Dead Sea. This is where it is in relation to the world. It's somewhat near Egypt, really near Israel and Jordan. And so this is the Dead Sea right here. The Dead Sea has a very high salt content, such that whenever you go into the Dead Sea, you can actually find pictures of people almost floating on top of the water. So if you imagine lying on your back and floating, people have been in water and pools and lakes and oceans and whatnot. If you kind of lay on your back, you can kind of float on top of the water. Well, it's really interesting to see. There's so much salt content. There's so much content in the water that you float really on top of it. It's very fascinating. Anyways, so it seems that there was a rebellion here, and at some point there was a big war between these 9 kings, and they split into 2 camps, as mentioned previously. And if you scroll down here a little bit, you find that there was 4 kings against 5. Those were listed up here. And the main person you really want to pay attention to is this Chedorlaomer guy. And as they defeated the 4 kings defeated the 5 in this valley, these kings, hold on one second, was the battle in the valley? Give me one sec. And the kings came out and they arrayed for battle against them in the valley. Yes. So they were battling in this valley. And so as they were escaping, as they were trying to run away, right? Whenever you're losing a battle and it's clear you're about to lose, you throw on your Nikes or your Adidas or whatever people are running these days and you run for the hills. So that's exactly what the 5 kings did. They ran for the hills, and as they fled, particularly the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, they actually fell into these tar pits, which obviously would trap you and likely lead you to an untimely death. But some of those actually survived who were running away. And the 4 kings, they ended up taking all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah, all their food supply, and they left. But they also took someone they shouldn't have messed with. All right? Sometimes someone has friends in the right places, and you just don't want to mess with those people that have the right connections in life. Well, guess what? These 4 kings, they took Lot. And as we know, that is Abram's nephew. And they not only took Lot, but they took his possessions. And that was just not a good idea. They didn't know who they were messing with. Justin, thoughts on this passage?
I agree. They didn't know who they were messing with. I do have thoughts. I mean, I don't have any better thoughts than what you just did. You nailed it, man. You nailed it. Now I want to say I have thoughts on Abram's response in the next passage. I agree that they didn't know who they were messing with, and so I'd like to comment on that after we get those verses read. But yeah,
Perfect.
man, I agree. I mean, the point is that we do have this area where there are these kings, and there are these militaries, these people groups, and I mean there's conflicts going on, right? I mean it's a hostile world for people who are traveling like Abram and Lot, right? This isn't just this easy deal. It's that they have issues they have to deal with, and where they're going. But yeah,
Cool. Let me read this next section and then I'll let you say your piece. Verse 13. Then a fugitive came and told Abram the Hebrew. Now he was living by the oaks of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and the brother of Aner, and these were allies with Abram. When Abram heard that his relative had been taken captive, he led out his trained men, born in his house, 318, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. He divided his forces against them by night, he and his servants, and defeated them, and pursued them as far as Hobah, which is north of Damascus. He brought back all the goods and also brought back his relative Lot with his possessions, and also the women and the people.
Nice. So I think this is an exciting passage because it gives us a different perspective on Abram. That I feel like this is this unique sight or view that we have of him that we didn't have of him before. So it says here he led out his trained men, right? So these are. I mean, I get a view of Abram here as being a warrior, right? Because so he's able to just go with his squad or with his entourage and defeat, I guess, a king, right? That one of the kings did this. So he's able to go defeat a king's military with his squad. And so what I'm not sure is it said led out of his trained men born at his house, 318. So like, I guess who trained those men? If they were really born in I guess his estate and he trained them, he's got to be a legit warrior. And also, he's got to be a legit warrior in the sense that he led them, right? If you're leading trained guys into battle, I mean, you would be, I guess, you would have to be very trained to do that, or else you would have let one of them lead. Do you know what I'm saying? Or what one of them would have led if you didn't have adequate training. And so that's really cool to think that. I mean, Abram can just go almost defeat a whole society to get back Lot and the possessions. And so now, obviously, God's sovereignty, right? I mean, God's on Abram's side, and so that's a factor. I don't want to say it isn't, but it doesn't. I guess based on the information, the way Moses wrote this, there's definitely a human tactical side of this when he said he let out trained men.
I would
So
agree. I
yeah.
mean, we're seeing a stark contrast, Abram, in this passage. You know, previously he went to Egypt with his wife, and he feared death in that
Mhm.
situation. And so much so that he lied about or misled the Pharaoh of Egypt that Sarai was his sister and not in fact, his wife. So we kind of have this like almost scared, timid Abram in the prior chapter. Then all of a sudden we have this kind of new and improved Abram who's, willing to go to battle in order to save his nephew. And
Yeah.
to me, it seems, and as we work this chapter, we'll see this a little bit more. But Abram seems like he's a bit more confident than he was previously. And so, yeah. Um, so Lot gets saved.
Yes, he
Um,
does.
these kings, they end up messing with the wrong guy. Abram goes out, defeats them, and gets back Lot. Now, there's going to be a couple of people that are going to benefit from this, right? There's going to be some people, some kings who previously lost the battle, who are going to benefit from Abram coming in and putting his foot down and wiping the floor with these other kings. Let's dig into that with this next section. Justin.
Let's do it, yo. Starting in verse 17. Then after his return from the defeat of Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Sheveh, that is the king's valley. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. Now he was a priest of the God Most High. He blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. He gave him a tenth of all. The king of Sodom said to Abram, Give the people to me, and take the goods for yourself. Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have sworn to the Lord God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take a thread or a sandal thong or anything that is yours, for fear you would say, I have made Abram rich. I will take nothing except what the young men have eaten, and the share of the men who went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their share. Now, something really cool. I want to talk about Melchizedek first. Melchizedek is a really cool, interesting, mysterious person in the scriptures, and there's different views on him. So Melchizedek is also covered in the book of Hebrews, most notably in chapter 7. So chapter 7 of Hebrews, starting in verse 1, for this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abram as he was returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abram apportioned a tenth part of all the spoils, was first of all, by the translation of his name, King of Righteousness, and then also King of Salem, which is King of Peace, without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God, he remains a priest perpetually. So there's been some different views on this Melchizedek guy. Some people feel that he was what they call a pre-incarnate Christ, meaning that he was Jesus who physically appeared in the Old Testament. Some people, and the reason that they think the evidence for him being a pre-incarnate Christ was in verse 3 of Hebrews chapter 7, without father, without mother, without genealogy, neither having beginning of days nor end of life. And that's part about but made like the Son of God, he remains a priest perpetually. So the connection, though, that was the reason the author of Hebrews even brought this up was because the whole book, the whole purpose of the book of Hebrews is the superiority of Christ, right? Because it was written to the Hebrew people, and it was talking about why Christ is superior to Moses, to the angels, to all these things. And so one of the things when you're talking about Christ is Christ is king, but then also Christ is high priest. So if he's king, that's kind of easy to present in the sense that he's from the tribe of Judah, because the tribe of Judah is from the tribe of kings. But how is he also a priest? Because a priest came from the tribe of Levi. So the point that is being made here is that Christ had to be attached to a priestly lineage that was superior to that of Levi. And the argument that the author of Hebrews was making here was that was Melchizedek, because Abram paid tithes to Melchizedek, meaning he was in submission to him spiritually. And Levi came from Abram. So Levi, being one of Abram's descendants, was in submission to Melchizedek. Therefore, Christ, being the rightful king in the line of Judah, his priestly lineage or his priestly line or whatever comes more in line with Melchizedek, which is superior to one of the 12 tribes of Israel. So, but getting back to, was Melchizedek a real person? Was he either a pre-incarnate Christ or a theophany? We've talked about theophanies before, right? A physical manifestation of God. But to be more specific, he would have been maybe a pre-incarnate Christ if you take that view. So there's split views. Some people feel like, well, no, he was a real guy. He wasn't a pre-incarnate Christ. And that's how they were able to compare Christ's lineage to this real priest that was just a godly man. And they explain verse 3 in Hebrews 7 as meaning without father, without mother, without genealogy, just that he was a mysterious guy that that was not a recorded genealogy. Not that he didn't actually have one, but just that
Hmm.
no one knew it because of the mysteriousness of him. So, anyway, the point is that there's different views. Whether you believe Melchizedek was an actual person or a pre incarnate Christ doesn't change anything theologically. But he is an interesting character, and he is rarely mentioned throughout Scripture. But when he is, it is mysterious.
Well, he's very high regarded. I mean,
Definitely.
with
Well,
the
he's high
closing.
regarded, and that's how we can link. That's why he was used to compare the superiority of Christ's priestlyhood. Definitely,
This to me seems like the first reference of a priest in the Bible, for that matter.
I agree.
So it definitely does seem interesting. I think the last righteous man we ran into was Noah, aside from maybe Abram, right? And so now you introduce this third character, and it seems like there are these righteous people that are floating around, and it's not just Abram, Abram at this point, obviously, right? We're introducing a new person that obviously is God fearing and worships God. So,
Henry, that's a great point. And I would like to tag onto that. You were talking about there are these godly people that are out there and are around, and so that fits well with some scholars believe Job actually lived around the time of Abram, and so Job would have been another very godly person who, even though he didn't interact with Abram, he was a godly person out there existing, like you were talking about, around the same time.
and Job is another person that comes up a little bit later in the Bible as it was written. However, the Bible is generally written in a chronological manner. However, Job seems to be in the timeline of earlier than when it was actually where it shows up in the Bible, for that
Correct.
matter.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I would also I think it's very fascinating here as well that you see that the king of Sodom says to Abram, "Give the people to me and take the goods for yourself." But Abram said to the king of Sodom, "I have sworn to the Lord God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take a thread or a sandal thong or anything that is yours, for fear that you would say, I made Abram a rich man. I will take nothing except what the young men have eaten. Let them take their share." So, another interesting moment where Abram is refusing to accept riches, which is a very interesting thing, right? I mean, how many people or have the opportunity to receive money that essentially they earned and they refuse? That's a very unique person, a unique situation. And clearly, Abram cares more at this point about the promise that God made to him
And also the reputation that his behavior reflects on God. I
and
feel
his
like too.
reputation. Yeah, absolutely. He cares more about that than worldly possessions. So, we're starting to see I think a pretty, cool guy. Listen, Abram made mistakes previously. He's going to make more mistakes, but you're finding somebody who's attempting to do their best to put really God first in their life. So definitely a rich passage here, and really excited to get some a little bit more action. Right? Who says the Bible is not full of action? Um, I guess nobody says that,
Nope.
but it is. There's some
Yeah.
action in here, and yeah, this is a pretty exciting passage. Any final thoughts?
I agree with what you were saying, man. Abram's a dynamic character, And I think there are times in the story when we see him maturing spiritually. But like you're saying, that's not going to be the last. We're going to read about more mistakes that he's going to make. But ultimately, man, Abram is going to have um, he's going to do some things that are impressive as far as faith is concerned, especially like he has no written Bible. He has no prior history of how God works. And so all this is just like his first encounter, that he's just trusting God and doing these things. And so obviously one of his greatest acts of faith is coming up, and it's very impressive. And so
Agreed.
yeah, I mean he's a dynamic character for sure.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you again for imparting your wisdom. Yes, thank you. Thank you. And hope to see you in chapter 15. We're going to jump straight into that. Have a great day.
See you guys.